Surrender Speech, Black Hawk, 1832. Black Hawk was a chief of the Sauk Indians, though the Sauk had forfeited their lands east of the Mississippi in an 1804 treaty. Black Hawk believed the treaty to be invalid. Angered by the loss of their lands and by incoming white settlers, Black Hawk led a brief war against U.S. forces. While Black Hawk won an initial victory, his warriors were defeated. Black Hawk surrendered 15 weeks after the conflict began. You have taken me prisoner with all my warriors. I am much grieved, for I expected if I did not defeat you to hold out much longer and give you more trouble before I surrendered. I tried hard to bring you into ambush, but your last general understands Indian fighting. The first one was not so wise. When I saw that I could not beat you by Indian fighting, I determined to rush on you and fight you face to face. I fought hard, but your guns were well aimed. The bullets flew like birds in the air and whizzed by our ears, like the wind through the trees in the winter. My warriors fell around me. It began to look dismal. I saw my evil day at hand. The sun rose dim on us in the morning, and at night it sunk in a dark cloud and looked like a ball of fire. That was the last sun that shone on Black Hawk. His heart is dead and no longer beats quick in his bosom. He is now a prisoner to the white men. They will do with him as they wish, but he can stand torture and is not afraid of death. He is no coward. Black Hawk is an Indian. He has done nothing for which an Indian ought to be ashamed. He has fought for his countrymen, the squaws and the papooses, against white men who came year after year to cheat them and take away their lands. You know the cause of our making war. It is known to all white men. They ought to be ashamed of it. The white men despise the Indians and drive them from their homes, but the Indians are not deceitful. The white men speak bad of the Indian and look at him spitefully, but the Indian does not tell lies. Indians do not steal. An Indian who is as bad as the white men could not live in our nation. He would be put to death and eat up by the wolves. The white men are bad schoolmasters. They carry false looks and deal in false actions. They smile in the face of a poor Indian to cheat him. They shake them by the hand to gain their confidence, to make them drunk, to deceive them, and ruin our wives. We told them to let us alone, but they followed on and beset our paths, and they coiled themselves among us like the snake. They poisoned us by their touch. We were not safe. We lived in danger. We were becoming like them, hypocrites and liars, adulterers, lazy drones, all takers and no workers. We looked up at the Great Spirit. We went to our Great Father. We were encouraged. His great counsel gave us fair words and big promises, but we got no satisfaction. Things were growing worse. There were no deer in the forest. The opossum and beaver were fled. The springs were drying up, and our squaws and papooses without victuals to keep them from starving. We came a great council and built a large fire. The spirit of our fathers arose and spoke to us to avenge our wrongs or die. We set up the war whoop and dug up the tomahawk. Our knives were ready, and the heart of Black Hawk swelled high in his bosom when he had led his warriors to battle. He is satisfied. He will go to the world of spirits contented. He has done his duty. His father will meet him there and commend him. Black Hawk is a true Indian and disdains to cry like a woman. He feels for his wife and children and friends, but he does not care for himself. He cares for his nation and the Indians. They will suffer. He laments their fate. The white men do not scalp the head, but they do worse. They poison the heart. It is not pure with them. His countrymen will not be scalped, but they will in a few years become like the white men so that you can't trust them. and there must be, as the white settlements, nearly as many officers as men to take care of them and keep them in order. Farewell, my nation. Black Hawk tried to save you and avenge your wrongs. He drank the blood of some of the whites. He has been taken prisoner and his plans are stopped. He can do no more. He is near his end. His sun is setting and he will rise no more. Farewell to Black Hawk. First question, how does Hawk's rhetoric in this excerpt advance the viewpoint selected in Part A? Let's look at Part A. Part A, how have Black Hawk's cultural experience shaped his view of white people? Answer, they have fueled in him great animosity towards the white people. Part B, how does Black Hawk's rhetoric in this excerpt advance the viewpoint selected in Part A? The white men despise the Indians and drive them from their homes, but the Indians are not deceitful. The white men speak bad of the Indian and look at him spitefully. But the Indian does not tell lies. Indians do not steal. Answer, parallelism contrasts the dishonorable behavior of white people with the admirable conduct of Native Americans. Part A, how have Black Hawk's cultural experiences shaped his view about the nature of the danger Native Americans face in their conflict with white people? Answer, his experiences have led him to believe that to save their culture, Native Americans must oppose and defeat white people to avoid becoming like them. Part B, how does Black Hawk's rhetoric in this excerpt advance the viewpoint selected in Part A? We told them to let us alone, but they followed on and beset our paths, and they collect themselves among us like the snake. They poisoned us by their touch. We were not safe. We lived in danger. We were becoming like them, hypocrites and liars, adulterers, lazy drones, all talkers, and no workers. Answer, he uses a simile and figurative language to convey the idea that white people morally corrupt Native Americans. And we're going to go on to other questions. Part A, how did the experience of witnessing the white men who came year after year to cheat Native Americans and take away their lands shape Black Hawk's viewpoint? Answer, it led him to believe that violent resistance to white people is both necessary and justified. Part B, how does Black Hawk use rhetoric in this excerpt to advance the viewpoint selected in Part A? Things were growing worse. There were no deer in the forest. The opossum and beaver were fled. The springs were drying up, and our squaws and papooses without victuals to keep them from starving. We called a great council and built a large fire. Answer, he uses ethos, suggesting his behavior was an ethical and just reaction against the deceitful and immoral behavior of the white men. We're skipping some questions. Part A, how does Black Hawk use rhetoric in this excerpt to advance his purpose of condemning white men? The white men are bad schoolmasters. They carry false looks and deal in false actions. They smile in the face of the poor Indian to cheat him. They shake them by the hand to gain their confidence, to make them drunk, to deceive them and ruin our wives. Answer, he uses a metaphor to suggest that white people have proven themselves unworthy of authority they wield. Part B, how does the phrase carry false looks and deal in false actions affect the depiction of white men in the excerpt in Part A? Answer, it suggests that their deceitful acts are intentional. Excerpt from Federalist number 78 by Alexander Hamilton. In 1787 and 1788, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison wrote the Federalist Papers to persuade voters to ratify the proposed Constitution of the United States of America. These papers included essays about all three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. And in Federalist number 78, Hamilton focused specifically on the judicial branch. Whoever attentively considers the different departments of power must perceive that in a government in which they are separated from each other, the judiciary, from the nature of its functions, will always be the least dangerous to the political rights of the Constitution, because it will be least in a capacity to annoy or injure them. The executive not only dispenses the honors, but holds the sword of the community. The legislature not only commands the purse, but prescribes the rules by which the duties and rights of every citizen are to be regulated. The judiciary, on the contrary, has no influence over either the sword or the purse, no direction either of the strength or of the wealth of the society, and can take no active resolution whatever. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm, even for the efficiency of its judgments. This simple view of the matter suggests several important consequences. It proves incontestably that the judiciary is beyond comparison the weakest of the three departments of power, that it can never attack with success either of the other two, and that all possible care is requisite to enable it to defend itself against their attacks. It equally proves that though individual oppression may now and then proceed from the courts of justice, the general liberty of the people can never be endangered from that quarter. I mean, so long as the judiciary remains truly distinct from both the legislator and the executive. For I agree that there is no liberty if the power of judging be not separated from the legislative and executive powers. And it proves in the last place that as liberty can have nothing to fear from the judiciary alone, but would have everything to fear from its union with either of the other departments, that as all the effects of such a union must ensue from a dependence of the former of the latter, notwithstanding a nominal and apparent separation, that as from the natural feebleness of the judiciary, it is in continual jeopardy of being overpowered, awed, or influenced by its coordinate branches, and that is nothing can contribute so much to its firmness and independence as permanency in office. This quality may therefore be justly regarded as an indispensable ingredient in its constitution, and in great measure as the citadel of the public justice and public security. The complete independence of the courts of justice is peculiarly essential in a limited constitution. By a limited constitution, I understand one which contains certain specified exceptions to the legislative authority, such, for instance, as that it shall pass no bills of attainder, no ex post facto laws, and the like. Limitations of this kind can be preserved in practice no other way than through the medium of courts of justice, whose duty it must be to declare all acts contrary to the manifest tenor of the Constitution void. Without this, all reservations of particular rights or privileges would amount to nothing. Question 1. How does Hamilton support and advance his purpose in paragraph 2 by using the word feebleness in this excerpt? That as, from the natural feebleness of the judiciary, it is in continual jeopardy of being overpowered, awed, or influenced by its coordinate branches. Answer. This word allows Hamilton to stress the idea that the judiciary plays a naturally passive role in the government, reacting to the other branches, so its independence must be guaranteed. Next question. How does Hamilton support and advance his purpose by using the words sword and purse in this excerpt from paragraph 1? The executive not only dispenses the honors, but holds the sword of the community. The legislature not only commands the purse, but prescribes the rules by which the duties and rights of every citizen are to be regulated. Answer: using these words allows Hamilton to describe the powers of these branches of government in familiar terms so that he can then contrast them with the powers he envisions for an independent judiciary. Question: how does Hamilton use rhetoric in paragraph 2 to define the role of the judiciary? Answer: by comparing and contrasting the judiciary to the other branches of government, Hamilton establishes how its role is similar to and different from the roles of those branches. How does Hamilton use rhetoric in paragraph 3 when addressing the importance of independent judiciary? Answer: he uses an appeal to reason and logic, arguing that since the judiciary's job is to make sure that laws follow the rules set out by the Constitution, the courts cannot be influenced by the branches that pass or enforce those laws. How does Hamilton convey his ideas about the limited power of the judicial branch of the government in paragraph 2? Answer: he points out that the judiciary cannot undermine the other branches, but they can both undermine it. One theme that emerges over the course of the novel is that war is a savage, ugly affair that permanently changes those soldiers. Oh, we need to read this first. Excerpt from The Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane. The Red Badge of Courage is a novel set during the Civil War about a teenager named Henry Fleming who enlists in the Union Army and the hardships he endures. The youth was in a little trance of astonishment. So they were at last going to fight. On the morrow, perhaps there would be a battle and he would be in it. For a time he was obliged to labor to make himself believe. He could not accept with assurance an omen that he was about to mingle in one of those great affairs of the earth. He had, of course, dreamed of battles all his life, of vague and bloody conflicts that had thrilled him with their sweep and fire. In visions, he had seen himself in many struggles. He had imagined people secure in the shadow of his eagle-eyed prowess. But awake, he had regarded battles as crimson blotches on the pages of the past. He had put them as things of the bygone with his thoughts, images of heavy crowns and high castles. There was a portion of the world's history which he had regarded at the time of wars, but it, he thought, had been long gone over the horizon and had disappeared forever. From his home, his youthful eyes had looked upon war in his own country with distrust. It must be some sort of play affair. He had long despaired of witnessing a Greek-like struggle. Such would be no more, he had said. Men were better or more timid. Secular and religious education had effaced the throat-grappling instinct, or else firm finance held in check the passions. He had burned several times to enlist. Tales of great movements shook the land. They might not be distinctly Homeric, but there seemed to be much glory in them. He had read of marches, sieges, conflicts, and he had longed to see it all. His busy mind had drawn for him large pictures, extravagant in color, lurid and breathless deeds. But his mother had discouraged him. She had affected to look with some contempt upon the quality of his war and patriotism. She could calmly seat herself and with no apparent difficulty give him many hundreds of reasons why he was at a vastly more importance on the farm than in the field of battle. She had had certain ways of expression that told him that her statements on the subject came from a deep conviction. Moreover, on her side was his belief that her ethical motive in the argument was impregnable. At last, however, he made firm rebellion against his yellow light thrown upon the color of his ambitions. The newspapers, the gossip of the village, his own picturings had aroused him to an uncheckable degree. They were in truth fighting finely down there. Almost every day, the newspapers printed accounts of decisive victory. One night, as he lay in bed, the winds had carried to him the clanging of the church bell as some enthusiast jerked the rope frantically to tell the twisted news of a great battle. This voice of people rejoicing in the night had made him shiver in a prolonged ecstasy of excitement. Later, he had gone down to his mother's room and spoken thus, "Ma, I'm going to enlist." "Henry, don't you be a fool," his mother had replied. She had then covered her face with the quilt. There was an end to the matter for the night. Nevertheless, the next morning he had gone down to the town that was near his mother's farm and had enlisted in a company that was forming there. When he had returned home, his mother was milking the brindle cow. 4 others stood waiting. "Ma, I've enlisted," he had said to her diffidently. There was a short silence. The Lord's will be done, Henry," she'd finally replied, and had then continued to milk the brindle cow. When he stood in the doorway, with his soldier's clothes on his back, and with light of excitement and expectancy in his eyes, almost defeating the glow of regret for the home bonds, he had seen 2 tears leaving their trails on his mother's scared cheeks. Still, she had disappointed him by saying nothing whatever about returning with his shield, or on it. He had privately primed himself for a beautiful scene. He had prepared certain sentences which he thought could be used with touching effect. But her words destroyed his plans. She had doggedly peeled potatoes and addressed him as follows: "You watch out, Henry, and take good care of yourself in this here fighting business. You watch out and take good care of yourself. Don't go thinking you can lick the whole rebel army at the start, because you can't. You're just one little feller amongst a whole lot of others, and you've got to keep quiet and do what they tell you. I know how you are, Henry." Question. One theme that emerges over the course of the novels is that war is a savage, ugly affair that permanently changes those soldiers who survive it. How does this section of the novel work to develop that theme? Answer. By establishing that Henry initially views war as wholly noble and soldiers are as entirely gallant and heroic. The novel creates a situation in which Henry's actual experiences as a soldier in a war will fundamentally change his understanding of it. How has Henry's exposure to the tales of Homer and other Greek legends influenced his views of war? Answer. They have led Henry to develop highly romanticized ideas about battle and what fighting in a war will be like. How does Crane's depiction of the way information was spread in the 19th century affect the novel? Answer. Crane captures the power of journalistic reports at a time when it was the primary means of transmitting information to a broad audience by showing its influence on Henry. Refer to explorations in the literature for a complete version of this narrative. In The Light of Gandhi's Lamp, Hilary Kronberg, Inglis, describes her experiences as an anti-apartheid activist. It was 1985. I had run from the spam box whips, rubber bullets, and tear gas on Wits University campus. I'd been arrested and photographed, mugshot style, for being part of a peaceful illegal gathering. What does this passage suggest about Inglis's view of the events described? Answer, it suggests that while she accepts that what she did to protest apartheid was illegal, she rejects the idea that she did anything that was morally wrong. In the light of Gandhi's lamp, Hilary Kronberg Inglis writes about how she feels before meeting her sister's jailer. And here I was wanting to reach out to take his hands in mine, to make him gentle, to settle the demons he thought he saw in my sister's face. I wanted to tame him, to save my sister's life. Could I do that? Only 19 years old, a white girl on the other side, in his eyes a traitor, a communist with viciously dishonorable intentions of overthrowing the white apartheid government. What does this passage suggest about Inglis's view of her situation? Answer, it suggests with vivid language her sense of being seen as a dangerous revolutionary by authorities in South America or South Africa. We had run faster than our legs could carry us from young white boys with machine guns perched on top of the Caspers, boys that looked just like my older brothers. What does this passage capture about Inglis's understanding of the situation in her country? Answer, it captures her sense of how apartheid had divided her country against itself and turned ordinary people into enemies of one another. Based on her descriptions in the lights of Gandhi's lamp, how did her experiences as a young adult in apartheid South Africa affect Hilary Kronberg Inglis? Answer, Inglis's experiences taught her that even people with warm and friendly dispositions can behave in immoral and manipulative ways. Based on her descriptions in the light of Gandhi's lamp, how did her experiences as a young adult in apartheid South Africa affect Hilary Kronberg Inglis? Answer, Inglis's experiences taught her that the struggle to topple injustice and equality demands that ordinary people face their fears and take risks. Read this passage from the light of Gandhi's lamp, in which Hilary Kronberg Inglis describes going to the police station in South Africa where her sister is being detained. I imagined what C.R. Swartz Square police station would look like. Would it be like John Vorster's Square police station in Johannesburg, where Neil Eggett had died in detention, committed suicide, authorities claimed, by hanging himself? How does Inglis's decision to use quotation marks around certain words affect the text? Answer, it helps convey the idea that during apartheid, many South Africans who disapproved of their government's racist policies did not trust the police to follow the law or to be honest about their actions. Select the misplaced modifier in the paragraph. It is important to help keep the earth clean. Some people, as they drive down the street, throw garbage out the window. Fortunately, volunteers often pick up off the street with gloves. Pick trash up off the street with gloves. Taking recycling to the recycling center is a great way to keep our planet clean. Select the dangling modifier in the paragraph. Yesterday was a rough day, running for the bus. The train began to pour. Then, at guitar lessons, I had to play a song I hadn't practiced. While walking home, I turned my ankle. My swollen ankle caused me to limp. Which revision fixes the dangling modifier in the sentence? Eating a slice of watermelon, pink juice dribbled down my chin. Answer, while I was eating a slice of watermelon, pink juice dribbled down my chin. Which statement best reflects the connotations of the word nosy and curious in the context of this sentence? Jack thought his sister Emma was being nosy when she asked what he was building, but she was just curious because he'd been spending so much time in his workshop. Nosy implies that Emma has ulterior motives for asking about Jack's project. Curious implies that she's genuinely interested. And last question. Based on its use in this sentence, what is the connotative meaning of the word prudent? The newspaper called the mayor prudent for avoiding a controversial issue during an election. Answer, wise.